Hello, my name is Connor Quinlan, and in this review I'm going to be doing a comparison between the Nikon D7000 and the Canon 60D cameras. Now, I don't have either of those cameras with me, but I can assure you that I have thoroughly reviewed both. If you follow my videos, you'll know that I had the Nikon D7000 and that I used it in several videos and did a thorough testing of that camera. Now, I would have rented the Canon and shown it in this video today, except that I simply cannot afford to do that at the moment. It costs almost $100 just to rent it for 3 days, and that much money just to use the camera in one video is just too much to spend. So I reviewed the cameras in several other ways. I was able to use it with my own hands at a local store, and I was able to look up many things online as well as images to compare with the Nikon as well. So this is going to be kind of a basic overview of the major differences between the two cameras that I was able to find. Then I'm also going to talk about my recommendations as to which camera you should use based on how you like to take pictures. So the first thing that I want to talk about are the advantages of both, and I'm going to start with the Canon. The Canon has a couple advantages over the Nikon. The first and the largest difference is video, of course. The video quality of Canon and the precision of Canon's video is a lot better than Nikon's video. It's a lot more professional. They can shoot full HD video at up to 30 frames per second, and two other modes as well, 24 and 25 frames per second, whereas Nikon can only shoot at 24 frames per second in full HD. And personally, the biggest advantage to Canon, I think, in terms of video is that it can shoot 60 frames a second in 720p, whereas Nikon can only shoot 30 frames per second in 720p. So with Canon, you get a lot more professional features. It'll be more like a professional video camera if you use Canon's video. Another advantage of the Canon is that it does have a better LCD than the Nikon does. The Nikon has a Vega screen, a 640 by 480 screen, whereas the Canon has a 720 by 480 screen. Now, it's not a huge difference, and it's not necessarily super noticeable, but if you do zoom into your pictures all the way and you really want to be sure that if you like to check your images a lot on the LCD screen, it can be somewhat useful. So now what I'm going to do is go over the advantages of the Nikon D7000. Now, the Nikon D7000 is newer and more expensive, so it is expected to be slightly better in a couple of ways. First way is image quality. Now, I expected the image quality to actually be significantly better than the Canon, but it actually didn't turn out that way. The Canon's actually pretty close in terms of image quality, a lot closer, in fact, than the Canon 7D. It's only about at ISOs above 1600 that you really start to see a difference between the two cameras, and Nikon after 1600 is better, especially at 3200 you can definitely see a difference. But anything below 1600, they look pretty much identical. So the image quality is not very different unless you're really into super low light photography and want to use really high ISOs. Another major difference is the speed, and I'm not talking about frames per second, although that is slightly different. The Nikon can shoot 6 frames per second, whereas the Canon can shoot 5.3, but that's not very much of a difference. The difference in speed is really in terms of autofocus. The autofocus system in the D7000 is a lot better than the Canon's, a lot better in low light especially. Nikon has a 39-point autofocus system, whereas the Canon only has a 9-point autofocus system. The Nikon's is not only is a lot more efficient and a lot faster, especially in low light. In daylight, there's not a huge difference between the two cameras, although I still believe that the Nikon is more accurate in most cases. The Canon can be a little bit faster at times, but like I said, you're compensating quickness for efficiency, and overall I would choose efficiency over quickness any day. And of course, Canon, you can't do micro lens adjustment like you can with the Nikon, so it's going to be either accurate or it's not going to be accurate. Now, the real difference, like I said, though, is in low light, in which case Nikon dominates. A lot faster, a lot more accurate in low light situations. A few smaller differences between the Nikon and the Canon. Some advantages that the Nikon has is it has a 100% viewfinder, whereas the Canon has a 96% viewfinder. Another advantage is that the Nikon has a dual SD card slot, whereas the Canon only has one SD card slot, which is useful as well for a lot of people. Another difference that makes a very big difference, especially in outdoor photography, taken in rain and dust and stuff, is the build. The Nikon D7000 has a partial magnesium alloy body with weather sealing, whereas the Canon just has a plastic body. And the difference between that, especially if you're an outdoor photographer, is pretty immense. I know that when I used a Nikon D80 and then I switched to a D300, which had weather sealing, and the D80 did not, the difference was enormous, and I was able to use it in light sprinkles or even get it wet without having to worry about it. And if you're an outdoor photographer who's going to be taking rain, fog, and dust and stuff like that, then a magnesium alloy body with weather sealing does create a pretty big difference, so that's a good advantage of the Nikon. And those are pretty much the major differences between the two cameras. What I'm going to do now is kind of give my recommendation as to which one you should get. First of all, I want to talk about the price difference. Now, the price difference is not nearly as great as I thought it would be. I thought the Canon was quite a bit cheaper than the Nikon, but that's not actually true. The Canon is only about $200 cheaper at the moment. The Canon is priced at about $1,000, whereas the Nikon is priced at about $1,200. So, price difference is not that huge. Now, when I would recommend the Canon is if you really want to use video and photography at the same time, because Canon definitely has far superior video than the Nikon does. But for pretty much everything else, the Nikon does definitely dominate, and for $200 more, you do get slightly better image quality at higher ISOs, better autofocus and speed. You get the 100% viewfinder, the dual SD card slot, the better build. It's just got a lot more going for it for $200 more, and that, to me, it would definitely be worth it as a landscape and outdoor photographer. The partial magnesium alloy body with weather sealing alone is worth that much money to me. But once again, this decision is up to you. If you're a Canon user and you don't want to switch all the way to Nikon, that's fine. The Canon 60D is a great performer and can do pretty much anything you want. However, if you are into low light photography, you might want to really consider the Nikon D7000 because it does perform a lot better in low light. And this has been a review of the Nikon D7000 versus Canon 60D cameras.